Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Trying to get my windows organized here.
I screwed up my hold shift to select multiple windows, but my Zoom share screens are now messed up. It shares all the windows instead of share screen.
Yeah, I think if you
individual window.
drop it and then come back to it, you should probably. Let me see what the. Interesting.
All right. I think it's better now. Okay, I think it's fixed. All right, so we got the link. Let me get the link posted here.
I'll be right back here.
Okay. I did see there was a way to share desktop audio, so you could have waiting room music or something, but I didn't have time to go find some copyright safe music.
There's a can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've just realised that I can actually unmute. There is, if you go to a mate of mine does a load of podcasts, and he rates the Spotify library regularly, and you can get either Creative Commons or royalty free stuff. Yeah, you can just find libraries on them, which he just fills in those podcasts with stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, all right, 2021, I will have some better background music ready to go. For now, it's just our lovely voices to keep people entertained while we wait for people to join.
It's a bit strange seeing a screenshot at the top of my Twitter.
Yeah.
So, top marks for anyone who can get the logo that's on the background, which is no longer apparently copyrighted.
I don't know. It kind of looks like Silicon Graphics or something, maybe. Or
bingo.
Really? I got it. Yep. First guess.
SGI.
Yeah. Nice.
It's mainly SGI only because the thing that made me get into technology and to be the inspiration for getting into software development was I was obsessed with Jurassic Park, and it was the scenes, most of the tech scenes from Jurassic Park. So in Jurassic Park, Dennis Nedry uses IRIX on SGI machines, but for some reason also Macs and some Java console that's a bit weird. The whole it's a Unix system, I know this and all that. So I found these SGI logos that these modern backdrops. There's 3 different colors, that you can get that someone just made on a blog, and I was like, I love this.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, we used SGIs in college. All the people that were studying to do graphics work were working on those. And yeah, I remember looking at them. I don't know if I used them much. We might have. I studied image science in school, and there was one of the languages I was learning was a language called IDL. It's very C-like, and I might have used that on the SGIs, but I don't quite remember.
They're beautiful looking machines.
Yeah. Yep. But they no longer exist, I guess, right? Like, was that like in the Java? It got bought by somebody in the early 2000s or something.
It was about by about 2006, I think it was. They just it was retired. I can't remember who bought it in the end, but I think the return of Steve Jobs and that kind of push for top end media stuff sort of generally killed off SGI.
Yeah, and I mean Unix was I think there's some challenges there. Probably.
Yeah, or they had a I forgot, it was actually the IRIX was a proprietary Unix, and by that stage Canonical had launched Ubuntu, and that had just nobody was using old proprietary Unix systems at that point. Everyone had sort of moved over to Linux.
Yeah,
the year of the Linux desktop, etc.
Yeah. Every year.
Yeah, yep. Every year. It's definitely going to be this year.
It's like, when's Half-Life 3 coming out? I think will Half-Life 3 come out before?
I think that's I think that Gabe Newell trolled everyone by purposefully by Valve calling their latest title whatever it is, Half-Life Elixir. It's the main character. Yeah, exactly. Instead of calling it Half-Life 3, because it clearly is, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is Half-Life 3, but all right, so but we can't confirm it because it's not called that.
Yeah, it's like basically free marketing. If you never confirm that it's going to exist.
It does write itself, doesn't it? My gaming is so shameful at the moment. I ended up buying a Switch. And because I have a newborn son, I say newborn, he's 6 months now. I have this Linux machine. It's actually a Linux gaming rig because of the Proton stuff that Valve brought out.
Cool.
And I mean, the Proton's absolutely amazing. Honestly, I've been playing. I was playing The Witcher 3 flawlessly on it on Linux.
On Linux. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It was absolutely on Ultra as well. I've got
is Proton like a better version of Wine or something?
It's a layer on top of Wine that gets. I don't know what it is that Valve have done, but they've put a lot of effort into putting extra layers on top of Wine for a compatibility layer, and it just works really, really well. So there's just none of it. I used to try to get stuff working on Wine back in the day, and it was awful, and there was always breaking bugs. And if you have a look at the library, they've actually got a tiered system in their library of how well games run, and the amount of things that have gone gold or platinum where you just don't experience bugs is crazy. That's but awesome. Yeah, I was on Witcher 3, which obviously I've got an AMD card. I've got a Vega 64, so it runs really, really nicely. But with a newborn son, I just don't have time to sit at the PC, so I've got a Switch, and then I bought Witcher 3 on Switch. So I feel like
all your time.
I feel like I've betrayed all of the gamers. Are like, right, you're playing this on Switch. The graphics are nowhere near as good, but who cares? I've got Witcher 3 in a portable console with a battery life of 3 hours.
Yeah. It's hard to beat portability and convenience for sure. I'm looking forward to getting Stadia working more flawlessly on on iOS. I think that it's kind of it works, but it's a hassle, and it's not, you know, totally easy for everyone, I think. So, but yeah, I've been loving Stadia this year, since PS4 kind of has died, and apparently no one can buy a PS5 now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the launch in the EU has been just as sort of chaotic, really.
Yeah.
That's not what the Slack the work Slack today was filled with only one sort of subject, really, which is how are CD Projekt Red coping with the launch of Cyberpunk, and it's a bit chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the launch in the
Whoa.
EU has been just
Yeah, if you got the YouTube open in the background, just make sure to mute the YouTube stream.
it's weird. I don't.
Somebody else might have joined up. Where's the?
I've got headphones on and no other sources, so it won't be mine. At least I don't think it's mine.
Yeah, I think it's fixed now. So yeah, so Cyberpunk on Stadia is amazing. Just FYI, if you want to play Cyberpunk, I can highly recommend Stadia.
Really?
There's no issues. It looks great, plays great. You can play it with keyboard and mouse or controller. And yeah, I mean, like at 6 p.m. or I mean, I think I was out walking the dog, so it was like 6:30 or something. I come home, I'm like, oh, cool, it's out, and like I click, and then the game launches. You know, it's like it's easy, and it works on your computer, it works on the TV. It just doesn't work on mobile devices yet. I mean, it works on Pixels well, but not on iOS super well.
I think it's interesting. I'm very, very far removed from that kind of world, but it'd be interesting to see where, like, now that if AWS have got the sort of, or is it AWS or Nvidia? I can't remember who the Stadia, the cloud
Stadia
platform.
is Google.
Oh, it's good.
So,
yeah.
If
their platform is getting to that point where you can just do one click cloud launch of Cyberpunk and it works flawlessly, I mean, we're getting somewhere with it.
Yeah, it's like, this is the future. The future is now. It's amazing.
My last kind of cloud experiment was I really didn't work. Instead of buying a laptop with my own money, I was desperate to try and get something ultra portable at the time. That's mainly because I was living in London at that point and sort of crammed in on the tube. You know, it's got that same kind of NYC vibe where you just, you know, to work, you pick up this tiny laptop and you can just about work. I was at the time I was a Symfony developer, so I was trying to get Symfony and PHP working on a sort of a crossover tablet with Windows. Then I tried on an iPad. Then I tried a bit of cloud stuff with I can't remember what it's called. There's an IDE. There's a cloud IDE.
Cloud9? AWS.
Yeah,
Cloud9, yeah,
that's it. Cloud9. I tried to get that working, and it was all right, but the machine was just like I had like several. Like I've left that whole journey. I'm left with an ARM Chromebook, and I've got to say the ARM Chromebook is. I don't do any coding on it. I just can't. But it's become an extremely reliable backup presentation machine. Not that matters at the moment because all of my speaking is being done online. So
yeah. Well,
probably an advantage.
I like this change to. I'll turn on the camera here since we're getting started. I am on the moon this month. But yeah, I actually did a presentation in October, and I demoed the GitHub code anywhere kind of. I'm blanking on the feature, but
that's quite
like
cool. That's quite cool.
Remote IDE, and it works really well. Yeah, so the video is available on YouTube if you want to go watch more about that. Gene says Chromebooks rock. So thanks for answering or typing that. So anyone, I guess, if you're unfamiliar with how the Zoom webinar stuff works, it's probably good to go over that again. So there's a Q&A. The Q&A feature here is, it's moderated Q&A. So if you have a question for James or for anyone, the panelists, go ahead and do the Q&A, and then we'll, usually we'll have the questions near the end. There is a polling feature, FYI, James, but unless you kind of tell me to do the polling thing, we'll not use that feature. It kind of interrupts the flow.
Sounds a bit sort of over-engineered.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're obviously on Zoom right now, and I'm gonna hijack Gene's question there. If you go down and look for the attendees in the Zoom meeting, look at the Q&A there. That's the link for the YouTube chat. So you can pull up the YouTube chat, and then if you want to have a more active conversation, we're sending people to YouTube. So that's kind of how we're handling these meetings for the last 6 months or so. It's been going really well. I've been enjoying doing this with Chris and Bobby, and we're looking forward to doing more of these in the future. So I feel like I'm like doing the intro stuff now. But yeah.
Logan, can you promote me?
Oh yeah, sure.
Sounds way more important than it is.
All right, permissions are fixed. But yeah, we'll wait I think a few more minutes, and then we'll get started.
Now everyone has to look at me.
Uh-oh.
So, Jim, we've been sort of switching between, I think, Jim and James. Do you have a preference?
It is. I have a preference for Jim, actually.
Okay.
I have a complicated relationship with my name. Basically, when I was 18 years old, I was like, I'm not going to be James. I want to be Jim. And I sort of just informally started using it. And then when I got to my 30s, I thought, do you know what? I really like my name, so I'm going to start using it. So now everybody uses it interchangeably, and there's no actual right answer. But informally as Jim is fine by me.
Okay. Are you saying second or something slightly different?
It is second, yeah. I get all sorts, and as my wife from last year has discovered, now she has to put up with all of the strange kind of pronunciations of my surname. It used to be Seconde. It's French, and it's supposed to have an acute accent on the E.
That was my next guess, having had some French experience, but
yes, I'm officially descended from the remains of the French royal family, who did a very, very bad job and got most of their heads chopped off. And then a dancing master arrived in England in 60. So that's my background. We've fallen from grace, and now we live in Birmingham, in the second largest city in the UK. And I'm a software developer.
Very good.
No gold halls for me.
I've heard every possible permutation of my last name and spelling and letters added or removed and everything else as well. So I definitely understand that experience.
The good thing is, though, it's unique. So if you mention your name or someone or you want to sort of Google snoop on yourself, you know that there's no. Well, actually, I say that, but the first time I joined Facebook, which I'm not really on at the moment, I did find someone called James Second, and they were a postman in Ohio, and I just why I didn't even know if it was real or not. But I thought I was the only. I thought it was the only James Second, but apparently there is one more. I'm not sure I quite believe it, but
I was shocked to find out that there was a lot of people who can't pronounce my last name, but it's not as easy as I thought it was.
Cahill.
Is it a C or a K or?
Well, so I've always pronounced it Cahill, and everyone I know pronounces it that way. But then, like when I went to school in upstate New York, and apparently in that region, that name is pronounced Cal.
That's unusual. I mean, we're the sort of obviously in the UK, we are the absolute top of bizarre local things where you travel 5 miles and it's completely different. There is a place in a town called Walsall near where I am in Birmingham, and there's a part of it called that's you'd see it written down. It's Coldmore, but that's no one calls it that. It's called Karma. No idea why. It just is.
I do remember I went to school in upstate New York and remember some strange spellings of things like suburbs and stuff. Limo or Lima or I don't know. I can't remember now. But yeah, there's definitely some interesting pronunciations. All right, guys, are we ready, Chris and Bobby? All right.
Yeah, fire away.
Okay, great. So I guess I'll do intros here a bit. I'm gonna do awesome PHP stuff, and then Chris, if you want to do the James intro stuff when you do yours. We're figuring stuff out here on the fly. All right.
Doing it live.
Yeah, doing it live. All right, welcome everyone. December 2020, we made it. Merge PHP. So a little bit about Austin PHP here. Longest running tech group here in Austin. We're mostly on Meetup is where you can find us, and then there's some information there on the Meetup page. We're on Facebook and a few other places. GitHub, fairly active, occasionally active, something like that on GitHub. We also do a conference, and 2020 was a little bit difficult, so we postponed the 2020 conference till next year, next May. And so if you haven't heard about Longhorn PHP, definitely check that out, longhornphp.com. And so it'll be May next year. And if you're interested in coming to Austin in May, and free plane ticket to Austin in May. It's not too hot. Don't worry. Like maybe like June, July, it's gonna be kind of maybe not the if you don't like hot weather, but May is pretty nice. So you have 5 days. Call for papers. All you got to write is a paragraph about what you think is interesting and submit the cfp.longhornphp. So definitely check that out. I know we have early bird tickets available still and whatnot. And yeah, so and then actually I wanted to tell you about another project I started in the last few months in quarantine time, quarantine land. So I started writing a bunch on Medium. So I came up with this new term we're calling PHP Ops. So it's PHP and DevOps, but really anything PHP related. If you're interested in writing PHP related articles, definitely submissions are welcome. And it would help me out if you go take a look at what we have posted so far. And I actually have enough articles now I can start telling people about it. So it's really meant for the community and everyone that's interested in PHP and hoping to build something awesome. And I don't personally benefit from if you I don't know if you guys know how Medium works, but if you join the paid tier version stuff and you submit an article to it, and you get all that account stuff set up, we don't personally benefit from it. Like all the page views and all the money goes to you. So it's just a way that we can like come together and make something awesome. So that's it for me. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, go ahead, Bobby, and I'll wrap it up with an intro and Atlanta stuff.
Sounds good. Whoever's presenting, I'm going to steal it from you, I think. Share screen. Oh, always do that. All right, so I'm Bobby Cahill. I am the lead organizer of Boston PHP. Basically, it's a two-man team right now. I handle what used to be the in-person stuff. Now it's virtual PHP-based meeting stuff. Gene Babin handles the virtual self-study stuff, which I'll get to in a moment. We are based on Meetup, similar to Austin PHP. There's our homepage. We are on Twitter. You can connect with us there. If you prefer Facebook, we have a Facebook group. It's a private group. If you just request to join and you don't have a sketchy looking profile, we'll add. We get a lot of people that try to join that have like 0 friends, or there's like a bunch of red flags that'll come up, and we block them to avoid spamming the group. But if you don't have like some weird profile, then we'll immediately accept you. Same thing with LinkedIn. We have a private group on LinkedIn. We do all our updates. Whenever I send out updates, like a new event or anything, I'll send it out to all 3 of those accounts. We've been around since 2002. It originally started off with like 4 people meeting in a like coffee shop or a library, and it slowly grew over the years. We're on like 18 years now, and we've had 276 events. And this number's probably a little outdated. I didn't update it this month, but last I checked, we had 3,838 members. Our focus is education, which is education in the sense of like learning PHP for new people. Idea sharing as in the sense of people. If you got a cool idea you want to share, like let us know about it, and we're happy to help you set up a presentation. This presentation applies to Boston PHP, but it also mostly applies to Merge PHP as well. Like if you have any ideas, you want to give a talk, someone who wants to give a talk, let us know. We're happy to work with them and get them up here and talking to the group. We're also big fans of open source, and we like to promote open source whenever we can. We're basically all about community. We have we achieve those things through what used to be in-person meetups. Hopefully, eventually, we'll be able to get back to that. Virtual self-study groups, and now virtual meetups, thanks to the pandemic. Like I said before, for events and general stuff, talk to me. You can contact us through the Meetup page. For virtual self-study stuff, you talk to Gene. And so just a quick description of the virtual.
Gene just did one last month, right? Like November?
Yes, I wish I could remember which one it was. There's a bunch of them. There's like, so it started off with PHP Percolate. And there was I think it's HTML5 brunch, but they all seem to be kind of food related. I don't know if Gene seems to really like food, but the idea is that like a bunch of people who want to learn a topic will join the thing. The way Gene explains it is we meet up at Boston PHP once a month for an hour or so, but what do we do with the other thousands of hours in the month? after you go home and you're excited that you learned about a new thing, but then it kind of dies off and you don't actually like follow through with it. So we have these, we came up with the idea of doing a virtual self-study group where a bunch of people come together and say, I want to learn PHP or HTML or Agile or whatever. And we go, let's pick a book that will you learn it together with. And then they decide on a book, and then they'll, every week, or I think it's every week, you do like a chapter a week. It may depend on the book, but then you post your exercises on the forums online, and everybody helps each other, throughout the process, and you just kind of learn together virtually. It's a thing that happened before the pandemic, and it will continue after the pandemic.
Gene says you did a good job explaining it. So, and I think
Gene's
we got
better at explaining it.
The topic correct. So,
yeah. So that's the idea of the virtual self-study groups. And if you want to see those, just head to our meetup page, and you'll see there's a bunch of, I think we refer to them as seasons. You can look for the latest one and join up. And we each topic has like a captain that kind of runs it, and it's a whole thing. But if you want to go check it out, you can message Gene. Will be happy to explain it to you if you want to send him a message via Meetup. Which brings me to tonight's presentation. So James Seconde is nice enough to come to us from. I guess Chris will do a better introduction, but it's part of my slideshow to just have a slide for the presentation. But I just want to point out that he's coming to us from the UK, and it's very late over there, and we really appreciate him staying up late to donate his time and teach us some things. So I'll hand it over to Chris now.
All right, 1 second. Yeah, I'll run through a quick Atlanta blurb here, and then we'll get started with Jim. Just a few things to mention. My slides are advancing weirdly. We'd like to thank our video recording sponsor, Variux.com. It's a local to Atlanta, a Magento integration shop. So we appreciate David Edmondson, owner of the company, and our sponsor for our video archive. We appreciate his support of the group. There's a couple things to mention. Coming up, Online PHP Conference 2021, a virtual conference put on by the PHP CC guys, or PHP company, Sebastian Bergman, Arne Blankerts, and Stefan Prisch. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope so. He's not here, so it doesn't matter that much. But anyway, January, they're doing a virtual conference. Also, as Logan mentioned, just to mention Longhorn PHP. Also here in Atlanta, Refactor.tech, kind of a polyglot conference focused on diversity and inclusion. And I haven't been to that one myself yet, but I heard good things about the previous iterations of that. So I just want to mention those things as reminders to our members, specifically in Atlanta, as well as anybody else who's interested, since it'll be virtual now. Also, just keep jumping slides here. We're on Meetup as well, meetup.com/AtlantaPHP. We also have a WordPress site, atlantaphp.org, where we have our discussion Google discussion forum to mention. Pretty low traffic, mostly occasional job postings, but we're open for discussion. As well as our video archive. We've got our video going back, I think, to early 2012. Almost all of our meetings have been recorded, with the exception of very few. So if you're interested in seeing prior meetings, check it out. Also, just want a brief introduction to Jim Seconde here from Birmingham, UK. If you haven't seen his bio, is a speaker, writer, engineer, developer, strategist. Sounds like he's got his hands in a lot of different things. He's a partner at Jump 24, and also an organizer of a Fusion meetup in Birmingham, and the founder of Brum PHP, their current user group. So without further ado, I will let Jim take over.
Okay, let's see if I can wrestle control and make this thing work. So Is there a swap thing so that it's full screen? Am I just full screen on everyone's machine?
Yeah. Yeah. We just see your face now. So
that's
just when you're ready, just go ahead and do the share screen and then do your presentation.
Well, I'm actually not sharing a screen because I'm just using the camera.
Oh, right.
Because I've got OBS. So in that case, I can just lock it like this, and that should work. Can I just check, Logan, that's okay. Okay, cool.
Perfect. Yeah.
OBS for the win! Hooray!
Hey.
Hello, everyone. It is 22 minutes past midnight from a cold, rainy, foggy island that's called the United Kingdom, where everyone speaks with Game of Thrones accents. I'm Jim Secon. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and thanks for the intros, guys. To Logan, Bobby, and Chris. I am James Secon, developer advocate, and this is Turbocharged Development with Docker, PHP Storm, and Xdebug. So first, a little bit about me. Please advance. There we go. So yes, as I mentioned, Brum PHP is the logo on the left. So I founded Birmingham UK's current PHP user group. It was a continuation of an old one. I co-host Fusion, which is a kind of mini conference type thing, also in Birmingham, in the second largest city in the UK. And most importantly, I am a developer advocate for Jump24, which is a Laravel partnered studio in the UK. I think we're possibly the only UK Laravel partner. If you go to, there's a couple of links here. So you've got jump24.co.uk if you want to go and check out the website for my employers. There is an engineering blog that's been going on started since about sort of May or June since I arrived, and there's some really, really cool stuff in there. If you want to check out my personal site, there is devtheatre.net. Probably the key thing there is I do a music podcast if you want to hear really, really strange and obscure records. If you want to join the troll fest that is Twitter and have a look at what I do, there I am at SeconJ. Feedback for this is always appreciated, although getting feedback in talks is really, really hard these days. I say these days, it's always hard. If you want to send me really, really awful jobs that have nothing to do with what I do, like a Java job in Singapore with relocation, then you can come and hit me on LinkedIn. There I am. And also, like every good developer, I have a GitHub full of terrible unfinished graveyard type projects that I will finish one day. I definitely will finish one day. So that's me. So for today's talk of turbocharged debugging, I have done this talk about sort of 10 times around about that, sort of maybe a bit more than that, and it has a UK joke in it that is also applicable to the EU. So I can give this talk at sort of Amsterdam or PHP or something like that. For all of you lovely people, it doesn't work at all. So originally, I referenced a character called Alan Partridge in the UK, who has a very, very sort of small mindset and can't really function as a human very well, and has to try and link everything to stuff that he knows about, which is usually things like cars or houses or really, really boring subjects. So this joke doesn't work. And so normally this is the bit where I go, oh, I'm going to link this to something to do with Alan Partridge. Because it doesn't work, I've had to change how it gets referenced, and I need to find. And the point is that debugging is, look, I know you're here for the debugging content, but it is a little bit dry. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, debugging. So I've got to put some sort of comedy into it. I say comedy, I mean some sort of vague humor. I'll let you in on a secret that I actually, as a developer relations kind of person, my degree at university is in stand-up comedy, and it's not in development, software development at all. But I am a software engineer, honestly qualified. That is my job. So I have found the equivalent of how to do it, and it's a thing called Google. I don't know if you have it in America. So let's take three sort of common debugging techniques that we use in PHP every day, right? So you've got var dump, and you've got DD and dump. That's from the Laravel and Symfony worlds, respectively. Or if you're using Slim PHP or Cake or something like that, it's still the kind of the libraries that are imported from Symfony, and Xdebug. So the comedy bit was comparison. And if I was going to do the Alan Partridge thing, who's the character that's not on here, he compares things to cars. But I can still compare things to cars, so I'm going to do it. It's just that I know nothing about American cars. So Google help me. And here's how it goes. Vardump. Vardump is this. I don't know what this is, but I will read out exactly what it says in the blog article that happened to come up when I put United States most boring car. I was flicking through Instagram the other night when I saw it, a video of a car dragging its back bumper down the freeway. Scratch that. Not just the bumper, but the whole wraparound rear plastic fascia, bent 90 degrees and flapping in futile fashion as it scuffled the road surface. This sort of thing happens, particularly in the Midwest. What kind of car was it? I recognised the basking shark silhouette immediately. Drooping nose and tail, oval rear window, a quick check of the taillight covers confirmed that it was a 1996 Ford Taurus, the saddest car ever made. Now, in the talk normally, I have a Ford Mondeo. Now, the Ford Mondeo is an EU version of a Ford car, so it's one that you haven't seen. The Ford Taurus, I have seen that. I mean, the picture is perfect. I mean, what is that color? It's just Vardump is everywhere. It's what when you start learning PHP, you know, it's there. It dumps that stuff. It does the trick. It's like vanilla debugging, right? It stops the request, it stops runtime, but it's everywhere and everyone's using it. But I mean, still gets the job done, right? DD and dump now we're going up a little bit. I've not changed this from my talk for the EU, which is the BMW Mini, because it's from an old design, from a classic design that it is popular across the world. But it has been taken over by industry leaders, in this case BMW, and souped up to make for a nice debugging experience. So that's our sort of one level above. And Xdebug is obviously going to be top of the chain. And this is what happened. I say top of the chain. I could have just put in like world's most expensive car, but I didn't. And this is what came up. The Ford Mustang came up. And the reason it came up is because I typed in American cars, American sports cars, but affordable, and this was the top one. And according to, I can't even see the reference. According to magazine, it's at the top of our list. The Ford Mustang has strong performance, responsive handling, and lively acceleration. Plus, its attractive styling is bound to turn heads. The point of this is, it is the top drawer, but it's quite affordable. It's quite accessible. It's not quite as superstar-y. You're not driving a sort of McLaren F1 or a Ferrari that's, you know, there's about 10 in the world. A Ford Mustang, you can afford that and you can buy that. And I'm going to show you why that's applicable when it comes to Xdebug, because this talk is about Xdebug. So let's get onto it. At Jump24, my employer, as a PHP studio, we ship code. That's our job because we're a software developer, and all that we do all boils down to process. And in the world of DevOps that we have now, and the world of shipping code in continuous integration, everything boils down to the quality of our work and what we do. So we have there's a few logos here of Grum PHP and PHP Code Sniffer, PHP Unit, Composer, but I'll just sort of break down various tooling that we use. All of our local environments now are all Dockerized, except of course now we can't sort of go one ahead of that and go to Kubernetes because Docker support has been dropped for Kubernetes, which is not great. But I think we all have to try and figure out in the world of DevOps that changes every 5 minutes what that means. But if they have a new developer on board, we give them the repo. There's already a Docker file there. And then they go Docker Compose up, and off it goes, including all the Composer scripts. And I'll mention, I think it's not, I was hoping for Composer to be next, but Composer scripts to do Laravel install in it, things like that. Elastic Cloud for our sins, everything's hooked up in our into Elastic Cloud. So we've got Bitbucket for hosting private repos. We've got Jira, hooray, Jira, the software tool that's supposed to do one thing but does about 9 billion things. And important to us is coding standards. When we ship code, we want to be proud of our work. So PHP CS and Grum PHP make sure that every line of code that we do adheres to PSR2 and PSR12. Composer, as I mentioned before, just kind of standardization, but also comes to semantic versioning and things like that, and also bumping and automated scripts and things like that built into Composer. Run PHP is a task runner for other things like PHP Code Sniffer, but also runs other things like PHP Unit. Talking of PHP Units, TDD, because everyone's doing TDD, because that's definitely how we write software, and there's no companies that ship software that don't do TDD. That's a joke. The employer I came from actually didn't do TDD at all, which is why everything they did was a hot mess. CI, everything, as I said, is built around our CI process. So we'll get on to, for most of our stuff, Bitbucket pipelines work, but we do have we're transforming some of our projects to automatically run with Jenkins to deploy to the pipeline, all of that. So given all of this pipeline stuff, the thing that we weren't using and hadn't considered was Xdebug. And we're a PHP studio, so you wouldn't consider it for JavaScript, because for JavaScript, well, if we do tests and stuff, we're moving on to Cypress and things like that, and Jest. And there's another one that I'm thinking, is it Nightwatch? I can't remember the name of it. But for JavaScript, when it comes to debugging and things like that, if we're doing it in Node, we do it in the command line. If we do it on the front end, then we're just going to do it in the browser window in the dev tools. But Xdebug has a bit of a strange relationship in the PHP world. Like, if you do something in Ruby, or you do something in Python, REPL and debugging is very much sort of out the box. Whereas because of PHP's nature, it's not in there. So our question, the reason why there's a question about this, is as part of our pipeline and as part of our development process for all of our developers, what's the deal with Xdebug? Should everyone be fluent in it? Because no one was at work. Everyone was like, oh, it's that thing for debugging, but do you really need it? And these are the kind of key things when it comes to Xdebug. So Xdebug is the fault of this man. I say the fault because this is the reason why the talk exists, is because Derek Rethens, who is the author of Xdebug, wrote a blog post this year, I think it was, and said anybody that doesn't use Xdebug for debugging in PHP is an amateur. And then there was a social media backlash. I'm not going to use the phrase that I was originally going to use, but it got us thinking, because we saw this and everyone in the PHP community was talking about it. So it got us thinking about, well, none of us use it. So what is it, and what do people think of? So we discussed it sort of internally. What do people think of when they think of Xdebug? We all agreed that it'd been around years. It's been around, the copyright starts from 2002, right? And that's when Derek started this project. This project has been around for a very, very long time. Probably the biggest bit of feedback is complicated to set up. The story for most people was, and this is back in the day of lamp stacks, right? Back in the day where you would have a Linux or a Mac machine or Windows machine, and then install Apache and then install PHP and then go through the horrendous rigmarole of trying to hook up all of the things, which had about sort of 2 million gotchas. And with that, Xdebug was complicated to set up. Everyone says the same thing of, oh, I would use it, but it's complicated to set it. And you have to faff around with sort of internal host IPs and things like that. And given that it's complicated to set up, all of our environments are running in Docker now, and we're talking about virtualized environments and container deployed continuous integration. So if it was bad when we had lamp stacks, surely now is it just not going to be more complicated now that we have Docker stacks running on things? And probably the biggest question, and it's the thing that if you say, why don't you use Xdebug? Why not just use die-dump? That's the conclusion that everyone says is, do you know what? I don't care about all these things that Xdebug is offering sometimes without actually trying or looking at the new features. And we'll get onto the fact that this demo is going to be done in Xdebug 3. Why not just use die-dump? Why not just kill PHP runtime and just dump out the stuff that I need? Because I can run it again and again. But these questions need answering. We do R&D at Jump24. If you're going to evolve as a studio, you can't stay still. This is why we have things like our Jenkins boxes running continuous integration and things like that. So in order to test this, we needed a test project, and we have a perfect test project as it happens. It's called Order, and it's very prevalent. It's very appropriate for this talk right now. There's the source code. It's on GitHub/Order, which is the organization. It's part of Jump24, and it's called Order Core. It is appropriate because the reason why I am able to speak at Merge PHP, which is Austin, Atlanta, and Boston combined, is because of COVID that is happening right now. Order was created because of COVID. It's a Laravel app. It's a very sort of a simple MVP Laravel app to give merchants the ability of small businesses, the ability to sell stuff online, but really aimed at takeaways, where in the UK, you just overnight after our Prime Minister said, that is it, in March on the 23rd, I think it was. That was it. All hospitality was shut down across the whole country. So Order was built in 6 weeks with an MVP in mind, and you just sign up as a merchant. It's appropriate for the test drive because it's completely open source. So if you want to see how we rolled out Xdebug and you want to see the actual code of what the Laravel app itself is, you can go and look at it. Here's the stack. This is what it looks like. So obviously it's a Laravel partner. It's in Laravel. Would kind of be a bit weird if it was in Symfony. We've just started transitioning the front end to Vue.js from Blade templates. So we've got a sort of mixture of both at the moment. As mentioned in GitHub, so there it is. All of our test running suite and everything is handled in Circle CI on the free tier because it's open source, which is really, really cool. And as mentioned before, if you want to run it locally, it's all configured in Docker. So now is where I test both my nerves and my fiber optic connection to the internet, because it still blows my mind that I'm about to do a code demo to you all across the East Coast and south of the US from England. So let's get started. We're going to PHP Storm. That's the IDE, because obviously that's part of the stack that we're talking about. And let's bring up my notes. Right. So the first step is, let's have a look at the Docker file. Docker file or Docker Compose? Docker file first. My broadcasting is making, yeah, okay, just making sure that my image is all right. So here is Docker file. We have Docker files for the stack that Order runs on. So it's a fairly standard stack of MySQL or MariaDB. I think it's MySQL actually, not Maria. And we're using Nginx because Apache is a little bit old, controversial, and PHP Docker file, and we have a queuing system, and we have Redis for caching sessions and things like that. So in our Docker file, for the moment, we're using PHP 7.4 FPM. Can probably bump that to 8 now. I don't really see any reason why, but that's the joy of Docker, is bump it up to 8 and see what happens. So we have Docker files for each of our containers. This is the Docker file for our PHP one, and the way that we configured it is we use Pickle because we have operating system level dependencies. So you can see we've got Pickle install Redis and Magic for some image stuff and uploading and things like that, processing we do. So we need to get Xdebug into the Docker file first of all to make it part of PHP runtime. So this should be relatively straightforward, but Pickle install Xdebug. If you do that from Pickle, it will pick up the latest version of Xdebug, so it will pick up version 3, and that's it. That's a joke. It's not it. There's loads more. That's the first step. So when I rebuild this container, and we will see it happen, Xdebug will be installed, but you need to have a base configuration for Xdebug to work. So out the box, if you install it, fine, but you need to start configuring some stuff, and you need to turn it on. And the way that Xdebug 3 is configured now has got some really cool features with how you configure it. So to configure it, this is how we do it. And this is generally the step that people get the most turned off by before trying to research it. So we need a PHP ini file that's used to configure Xdebug. So I'm going to create one. So if I go in my ID to, let's go into the PHP file, the folder where the Docker file is. And I'm going to just delete this and pretend that you didn't see it. That's weird. Looks like I committed it into the repo and I didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to create a new file. And this is going to be our configuration for Xdebug. And I'm going to call it Xdebug blank file. And we need to give a set of base configurations. So I'll paste it in, and I'll tell you what they are. So there they are, and they look like this. Send extension Xdebug, that just configures the Zend runtime, the PHP engine to just enable the Xdebug module. This bit is important now. We have a thing called Xdebug mode, and it's broken down into a series of 7 different modes. And for every mode that you want, you just add it in a comma separated list. So for this, I'm going to, I don't really need develop. I just need debug. So if you put Xdebug mode, debug, then you will get this step debugger, which is the thing that I'm going to be talking you through and going to show you. The other things that are available are you've got things like code coverage. If you want to use PHP units to use the code coverage tool that Xdebug enables, you've got things like garbage collection statistics, which looks like this. If you do GC stats like that, quite important, and I'll only touch on this at the end of the talk. But profile. If you put profile in there, that enables the profiler. So if you switch on the profiler, it will create a profile file that will benchmark the whole of your request. And that, when it comes to performance, is very, very cool. And we'll do a sort of brief touch on that at the end of the talk. And you've got trace, which is a function trace tool, and develop, which is development aids, where we're talking about var dump. If you enable develop, then you get a very, very enhanced var dump, which tells you a lot more cool stuff. But for the time being, we're just going to have debug. This line here is something that makes Xdebug a lot more palatable to use in a Docker stack that didn't exist until about 2015 or 2014. The remote host, or it's now called client host, is host.docker.internal on a Mac. If you're using Linux, it's something similar. I can't remember. And if you've got a Windows machine, it's also something similar, but it's reserved keywords. That host.docker.internal is a reserved keyword for the entrance into your Docker stack. And that makes things a lot easier. Before, it used to be exporting like bash variables, like command line variables everywhere. It was awful. This is a lovely new feature of Xdebug 3, which is called Start with Request. And it eliminates a lot of older tinkering bookmarklets and remote start, automatically start on remote host only. It gets rid of all of that. If you have start with request, yes, it basically says if you have a request and you have this option on, the server will look for any listeners, any client. In this case, the client is PHP Storm, which will be listening. The ID will be listening on the port. If you put start with request, it will put the focus in the foreground, and we'll see that happen. So there we go. Next bit of this is we need to get this INI file into our Docker file. You know, we need to get it in Docker Compose. So this is the Docker Compose for this project. So we've got, there's our Nginx container, there's our PHP container, there's our MySQL, Redis. Not going to do it onto WebGrind, that's later. So we need that INI file to be mounted into our PHP container so that PHP reads it at runtime and says, where's the directory that all of my INI files are stored? Okay, and I found a new one that you've just mounted. Okay, cool. And it goes into volumes. So just copy the line, because typos are the work of the devil when it comes to live demos. There it is. So that line there, on the left in Docker Compose, you are saying here is the local file system, and on the right you've got the point of which it is being mounted into the volume. So on the left it's xdebug.ini, which is the local file that I've just created. And on the right, I want you to mount it to user, which in our lovely Unix kind of system doesn't mean user files at all. It means system level files. Hooray! Local etc php conf.d. that conf.d file is the directory is where all of our PHP additional INO files are mounted and loaded. So there we go, mounting the left to the right. So I'm now injecting it. And we have one more key thing to add in Docker Compose to make this all work nicely. And this took ages for me to get right, and it was a bit of a learning curve. There is an environment variable that PHP Storm wants in order to be able to listen to Xdebug, and it's called PHP IDE config. There it is on the left, and it's a string that looks like that. Server name equals insert the name of your locally hosted project. In this case, it's uk-restaurants.test. That's what I have in my etc hosts file. If you don't do that, PHP Storm for the incoming request will not be able to link your project up to your file system. And the reason is because it uses the server system in the preferences, and I'll show you that in a minute. I'm not really a fan of the UX of how some of the things that PHP Storm have, because I find it a little bit over-engineered, a little bit complex. But it was a learning curve, and I learned it. And you know, PHP Storm is still my idea of choice, so I made it work. So in order to get it working, I'm going to bring up the preferences, and I'm going to go to servers. And there it is. You go to languages and framework, PHP servers. This sets up your PHP servers. And I've got to say, before I started using Xdebug, this is a feature of PHP Storm that looked really weird and complex, and I didn't like it, and I never used it because it confused me. Now, you have to use it because of an incoming request with listening to a port. PHP Storm needs to be able to link it to the project that you're on. So in this case, my project is uk-restaurants.test. So that's an arbitrary name up the top, can be called anything, but the important thing is the host here, which is uk-restaurants.test. The port is 443 because everyone's using HTTPS, surely. And the debugger is Xdebug and not Zen's one because that kind of died. The mappings down here are really important. If you don't do the mappings, it won't work. And the reason why they're important is because if you don't specify an absolute path to the server, which you can see on the right, if you don't do that, PHP Storm will try and map the incoming request to your file system. And if it does that, the incoming request, because it's Laravel or Symfony, doesn't matter, will be in the public directory because the entry point to the application is app.php or index.php in your public directory. So it's already one level down. So it won't be able to map back up the file system when you're debugging. And the point of the debugger is it can traverse through all of your code on the file system. So it looks like this to fix it. It looks like this to kick off, to make sure that you've got it set up correctly. On the left is my file system on my local machine, which is users. It's a Mac, so users gym sites, and that is the base file of this directory of this project, which is order core. On the right is the mounting point, which is var w vhost, which is where Nginx serves it from. It's not vhost /public. That's the bit you need to take out. So as long as you've got that, from then on, it can map properly later on. And that is it. And it's a live code demo. So now I'm going to start praying. With everything in place, with xdebug.ini being injected and the Docker file having Pickle installed Xdebug and Docker Compose, I'm now going to see what kind of success I have. So here is my command line. I have my application working at the moment. If I just go to Firefox at the moment and refresh the page, this is the landing page for the project. Forgive the bars down the middle. That's because it's development copy. But development copy because you're getting a special window into Jump 24's magic that we work. So I'm going to kill Docker down, Docker Compose down, not Docker Composer every time. Docker Compose down. Let's type the command properly, shall we? Down we go. Cool. And now with the new things added on, with Xdebug added in, I'm going to Docker Compose. Docker Compose up, run it as a daemon, and I need to run build. Nice. Hooray for caching. So if I do Docker PS now, there we go. My stack is up. I'm going to SSH into the container, the PHP container. So Docker exec, keep it alive, bash. And if I go to PHP version, I do not see what I want to see. Hooray.
You have to specify the container name, I believe, or the image name.
There's always some sort of terrible mistake I run. So if you want to see my, thanks very much. If you want to see the version of PHP that I'm running on my Mac, there it is. What I was running so quickly that I didn't even bother to look at the feedback. So Docker exec IT, and let's actually SSH into the container. Thank you very much. UKR, PHP, and bash. Now I am in a container. And PHP, I was looking at that going, PHP 8. I'm sure that I haven't specified PHP 8. There it is. So you can see there it's got with Xdebug 3 on there. So in the command line, you've got Xdebug 3 configured. So now we need to actually look at the Xdebug configuration to make sure that our configuration has managed to get in there. We're going to do that from the web side of things. So the way I'm going to do that is if I go to my IDE, I'm going to go to app.php where Laravel is bootstrapped, and make sure that we're all happy. Get a bit of an insight into my mindset where I want to do a DD of test first before I do anything. There it is, test, good. I'm going to zoom up. I'll just assure you that says test at the moment. I'll zoom in later when there's stuff to look at. So there is a new thing with Xdebug 3, which is really, really cool. And it's called, a bit like PHP info, it's called Xdebug info. There we are. Xdebug info. Save that. And if everything is happy, I press refresh. Hooray! Let's zoom in a little bit. So this is new to Xdebug 3, which is really, really nice. It's kind of the portion of PHP info that normally lists all of your environment, but Xdebug has its own kind of window that you can call. So as mentioned before, there's a modes now when you're configuring it with the INI. So you've got this breakdown here. So you've got development age, coverage, garbage collection statistics, profile, and the step debugging and tracing. And it tells you whether it's on. It's got links to the docs as well, which is really cool. The diagnostic log, you can't see anything at the moment, but when Xdebug struggles to try and boot something up, or it's trying to read something, it will give you it in the logs, which is really, really handy. It's an important thing to note that this section of this breakdown here of different different modes that are available for Xdebug means that from a DevOps perspective, you can choose off. You can just say Xdebug is off, and it will be literally off. And we haven't had the ability to do that before. So for pipelines and production versus UAT, stuff like that, controlling servers with Xdebug, whether it's switched on or off, is now a lot more granular, which is really, really cool, especially when it comes to when you're a bit worried about performance. So all the rest of the PHP configuration is down here if I scroll down. The important thing is making sure that our INI file has been injected, which it has, because if you see client host here, it's got host.docker.internal. Xdebug client port, I'm going to quickly show you this because it's something I missed out. The default port is now 9003 for Xdebug, and that is important because you need your IDE to be listing on 9003. So if I go to PHP Storm and I type in Xdebug, there we go. This is the debugger preference panel, and there it is highlighted. You can see that I've put the debug port to 9003. That's kind of important because back in the before the Xdebug 3, the default port was 9000, which was shared with PHP FPM, and that's going to cause conflict. So you don't want that. So make sure you set it to 9003 to listen. with that in mind, we have a environment that is ready to go. So before I actually start debugging stuff, which I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a quick recap for some fun slides. Here's just a quick recap of the setup. So the Docker file, Pickle install Xdebug. There are other ways, if you check Xdebug's website, of installing it. You can do it at operating system level dependency in something like Ubuntu using Synaptic if you want to, but Pickle is just a very, I think we found just the most efficient way to do it without any complications. Custom PHP INI with the Xbug environment variables injected via Docker Compose. The IDE config, this is a bit of a gotcha, and this is only applicable for PHP Storm. People have asked before if I'm going to do a talk like this with VS Code. I probably will, because I do use VS Code mainly for front-end development, but for PHP Storm, we need that PHP IDE config. Listened on 9003, important change from Xdebug 3. The client host is docker.internal.host. That is Mac, but there are equivalents on Windows and Linux. Start with a request. Yes, make sure that you put that on. There, you can see various configurations for how you want to control how the focus is controlled when it comes to Xdebug. But for now, start with request. Yes, just gives you a blanket. Yes, please just start my debugging session. And we'll see that in action in a sec. And the modes. Here are all the modes in all their glory. Off, develop, coverage, debug, GC stats, profile, and trace. So I am going to show you some controls and hit a breakpoint and actually show you what it does what it looks like when it's in PHP Storm. So now I do my praying thing. So let's go to the app first. I need to take off that. Oh, I've already done it. So if I refresh the page, I should get. There we go. Get my app. I'm going to log into my app. Here we go. Merchant login. Here's some I prepared earlier. Test.com. And I'm going to log in. This logs you in as if you're a merchant that's selling stuff. I'm not going to go into sort of domain like specifics or anything like that. You get this dashboard. This is, like I said, it's the reason it looks the way it is because this is like a test development copy. Gives you some stats stuff here, and gives you like a breakdown of orders. So the Laravel bar is down here, the debug bar. So I'm just going to open it up. And when you log in, you hit this dashboard. So if I go to root, just bring that up a bit. In the root, we've got the root that we're hitting, and it gives you some info because the Laravel debug is switched on, right? It's the equivalent of the Symfony profiler. So it tells you what it uses. So this uses dashboard controller, and that controller in our code base, it's an invocable controller. At Jump 24, we use invocable controllers. It means that there's a lot more controllers, but also feels like we have a lot of control over our code base. This is called dashboard controller, and this is what we hit. And the root is called admin.dashboard. So in order to start our Xdebug journey, I'm just going to put a breakpoint in stop runtime. So given that, if I go into here and type in dashboard controller, there it is. Here is our dashboard controller, and as it mentioned in the debug bar, it's an invocable controller. Inject some stuff, our dependency injection, and then we have this thing where it effectively pulls you out as a user, gets some stuff, gets some statistics, and gives you a dashboard with things on it. So I'm now going to stop this and go to start debugging. So the way we do it is, for this, I'm going to choose line 30. If you press that button, you'll see that a red circle has appeared and there's a red line across it. That is you setting a breakpoint in PHP. And then up here, can you sort of see it? It's not very visible, actually. I'm clicking it, but in the top right-hand corner, I need one of those. This is where I miss my laser pointer and, presenting to real people. A tooltip has come up. So that is your listener where you switch it on and off. So if you switch this little telephone, call me, then it will switch it on. So with all of that in mind and set up nicely, and our server nicely. If I refresh the page, it's a Mac and I'm a Linux user, so I just press Control and not Command. I didn't touch that. The debugger did that for me. Hooray, it works. So because I had that Xdebug variable set to start with request, it said yes, and it's listening, and it stopped it. So runtime is stopped. If you go back here, you'll see in the top left-hand corner that Firefox is still running the request. But I now have PHP runtime at my fingertips, and this is where stuff gets kind of quite cool with the amount of stuff that you can do with Xdebug. So I'm going to just make this. This is the debugger panel in Xdebug, in PHP Storm. So I'm just going to show you two key things. On the left-hand side is the dynamic stack navigation. So for many PHP developers, some of us are used to navigating through stack traces and stack dumps all the time. The one that I've grown up with is the Symfony one, where it has that ghost and it says, boo, everything's gone wrong. And I'm going to show you a load of horrible stuff. Most of it is Symfony and not a lot of it is your actual code. That's not a dig. That's just the way that we do things. This is the same thing. This is the stack trace, except we have runtime stopped, and this is Xdebug profiling. It's in real time, so it's navigable. So at the moment, you can see that it says dashboard controller PHP line 30, but I can click through any point in this stack and I can navigate through it. And the editor will update the precise point in time of the code. For most of this, this is actually going through the Laravel code base. But for when you have your own code and your own domain logic, it's pretty vital. So yes, you can navigate through, but the panel on the right is the variables panel, and this is where you use it in conjunction for serious pat. So dashboard controller 3 is my code, but it's extended off controller. So if I scroll one down, the variables panel on the right-hand side are the variables panel set at that point of runtime that I am calling, and it will update dynamically to any point of the application that I set. So with that in mind, I can navigate through my entire call stack at any point and then look at what environment variable was set at that point, which is pretty much, especially imagine if you're coming onto a project and it's spaghetti code and it's a legacy Zend framework application, or it's an old Symfony 1, or it's a Laravel 4, or something like that. Especially if you didn't write it, you've got the whole runtime at your fingertips and all the variables that are set at the moment. So if I go to dashboard control at the moment, on the right hand side, all the variables there. So merchant, repository, request, and I can just drill down into them. There you go. The event dispatcher. There we go. There's the event dispatcher. There's a whole container of the application there, but all the listeners that are listening to that particular thing, I mean, you can drill into anything. And that's pretty cool. And I don't understand why people just don't use it. I think because, like I said before at the start of this talk, it's a bit fractured in PHP, where the debugger, in this case Xdebug, which is pretty much now, I would say, the de facto thing that you should use, it's not baked in as part of PHP, but there's a reason for that, because the way that the language is structured, and because it's a true open source framework with people voting on things, which is cool. Stepping through, I'm just going to quickly talk you through the things, the navigation techniques. So step over, you can see the tooltip there. Step over executes that line of code, and then it runs the next one, which is fairly sort of self-explanatory. But step into this line, for instance, line 30 that I'm on, you can see there's a method call on it. The method call, I don't know if you can see that, it's kind of small, but is get time period for orders, and it passes in the request and it gets some time periods and things like that. If I ran step over, it would run that line and go to the next one, and it would update the variable panel on the right and just tell me what it came back with, that sort of thing. But for get time period for orders, which is that method call, I might want to actually drill into it. So that's where step into works. So step over is run this line, step into actually drills into it depending on how deep you want to go. And that's important because the next thing is called force step into. And force step into is when you want to really drill down into the fine granularity of your application, especially when you want to drill down into the third-party libraries that have been fetched from Composer. So all the third-party libraries and stuff you want to debug Laravel quite, or Symfony or whatever, if you want to drill down more into it. Force step into, I have found, I didn't think I'd use it, but in the past month, I have actually used it to find a bug in, I was going to say in Laravel. It wasn't in Laravel. It was in a library that Laravel used. So it is pretty handy. And step out is the next thing. Step out is step out is just execute all lines in this method and return back up the chain. So if you're done with where you are, then you can just come back up. My final thing is the thing that I love for navigation. It's called run to cursor. So it means that you just click on a caret and set it to a cursor and it will run to it. I think I tried this last week and it didn't work with Xdebug 3. So let's hope that it works now because I'm going to try it. If I scroll down this method a little bit, I'm going to choose line 64 and then press run to cursor. And it didn't do it. I definitely need to look into that. I probably need to talk to Derek about why it doesn't do that. So normally it does that, but I didn't do it there. The joys of live demos, hooray. So that's navigation. I'm now going to show you a bit of debugging in action. This is a debugging. Well, I see debugging in action. I'm going to do an example based on a real world example for this code base where something went wrong in this code base and I couldn't figure out what was going on until I debugged it with Xdebug. So I did all this boasting about TDD. The code base that you're looking at, the open source code base, is it got a complete test suite. So I'm going to run something on the test suite. Command line. And I'm running it in my container. Hooray, not running it on my local machine. So if I go vendor, binary, PHP unit, and I'm going to filter by a test called can add item to order. The reason why it's in snake case like that is because our function methods got longer and longer and longer, and they didn't look very nice in snake case. I realize that's in camel case. I realize that's like a totally open, hostile debate that all of us can have. I think I've spelled that right. Yeah. And off PHP unit goes. And that has failed. And this is where Xdebug comes into its own for me and also for the team at Jump 24, of where you've got a test suite, stuff is failing, but you need to drill down into why it's failing. In this case, it wanted a HTTP 200, but it got a 422. So it's failed asserting the two things are equal. But when you are doing this kind of testing, where you are running WebDriver to run fake browser tests, which is what this is doing in our code base, if you do the die dump technique, or var dump and then die, drilling down into the point that something like this is failing becomes extremely laborious and very, very difficult, and or more importantly, the most important thing, wastes a lot of time. I'm going to show you how to not waste a lot of time. So we know this is failing. So the test is called add to order test. So I'm going to navigate to it. Add to order test. There we go. Here's the test, and it's line 114. There we go. Response, assert status, response, HTTP, okay, and it's not. So I need to look at what's being given to it, which is this here. So I'm going to mock a JSON post to this endpoint and assert that I get a 200 back, but I'm getting a 422. So I'm going to find I need to look at the controller this is running on. Can add item to order, so that I know that can add an item to order is looking at the API for adding items to order. So that's called that's the That's the request. This is a Laravel thing, so I'll come back to this. As a request. So what uses this request? Where's the controller? There we go. There we go. Add controller. Cool. So I skipped over that bit on purpose so that I could just say all I'm looking for really is the controller that this test is using, and the controller is called add controller. Here it is. So I'm going to scroll down. So this is invocable. So because it's invocable, I know that this is the thing that's being hit. I don't have to look at the methods. I just know it's this method. This is failing. So I'm going to put a breakpoint. This is the natural way of looking at things. If this is failing, something's wrong with this controller, so I'm going to put a breakpoint on it. And I'm listening. So the test is using this controller. So I'm going to run the test again. The secret to this bit is when you run tests, Xdebug and doing breakpoints are available as if you're using it on the browser. It's no different. So importantly here, the test has failed again, but the breakpoint has not been hit, which means that that controller is not being hit. So it enables us to drill a bit further into things. Oh, that's the browser. That's gateway timeout because I'm not terminating my sessions. So if I go back to the code, so this controller is not being hit. So if this controller is not being hit, I need to go a level up. So this has a thing called API add item to order request. There it is. And this is a Laravel thing, but it's actually extended off the Symfony code base, and Symfony has a similar thing where you customize a request that hits things. So I have a thing called rules here, and the rules returns a payload of things rules that should be that should pass. So it gives me validation with the request. So it has inventory ID, variant ID, merchant inventory options. So if I put a breakpoint here and then rerun it, are we going to hit the request? We've hit the request. We've hit the breakpoint. It's taken me to the IDE automatically. So we know that this is running. So I want to know what this. I want to know what's happening now. I want to run through what the code is running through. So the way to do that is I'm going to use the stepping function to step through stuff, and I'm going to use it in conjunction with the variables panel to have a look to see what's going on. So I'm going to use the step over messages, attributes. We're in the container here. Make. Okay, so I'm like pigeon reading the code. So this verifier. So if does this container set validator. Okay, this is our validator. This is the Laravel validator that is working. Set that in container. Blah 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 blah. If method exists, this with validator, then run this, which means that it's attaching it into the container. Set validator. Okay, cool. Cool. Okay. Now we've reached a pivotal point. We've reached a pivotal point because there's a logic check here, which is if the instance fails, this failed validation instance. So if it passes this logic test, which it will because we know the test is failing, there we go, goes to the next line. But I have the variables panel open. So I want to look at what is going on. So the top thing in the variables panel is an instance of the validator. So I'm going to drill down into that. There's an array there called failed rules. I'm going to drill down into that. There's a key there called variant ID, and I'm going to drill into that. And it's required. That's your 422 from your test. The 422 is it wants variant ID, and it's not been given it. So, okay, let's stop runtime, and let's look at what we're giving it. If I go back to the test, API, what is it? API. No, that's the request. Can add item to order. That's it. So line 108, this JSON post, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we're giving it order item payload. So what's that? There it is. Merchant, inventory ID, inventory options. Variant ID is not in there. variant ID equals, and then I must need to give it a variant ID. I know that this is like logic with our application, but there we go, imagery variant ID. That's what was missing. So if I switch off the debugger now, and then go back to the command line, and then run the test. Oh, that's nice. I didn't notice that before. The test has passed. And also, I've just noticed that Xdebug actually says I can't connect to the debugging client, which is new, which is really cool because I switched off the debugging client. That test has passed because we've just done a live debugging session on it. And that's effectively, with this code base, that's production. That's basically production debugging. So now I'm going to do some cool stuff with watchers and runtime modification. So if I go back to that test bit is done now. So I'm going to go back to that control, that dashboard that we had. Watchers are sort of nothing new, really. I mean, you could, if you want to see a watcher in action, you can take something, take a project that you've got and open up your dev tools and put a JavaScript watcher on something. But I'm just going to briefly show it in action anyway. Watcher allows you to, it sort of does what it says on the tin. It will allow you to actually watch a PHP variable in real time. So in this case, I'm going to watch line 40, which is a variable called dashboard metrics. So if I set the debug point to just before, and that's where I want my runtime to switch on the debugger now. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to start the debugging session up now by refreshing the page. There we go. And now the call stack is on the left, as we've seen. I'm just going to move that over if my mouse will let me. Come on, mate. There we go. And the variable panel's in the middle. I've been hiding the watchers panel, which is the one on the right. So I'm just going to expand it. Oh, there we go. On the right-hand side, there is the watchers panel. Any variable that you put in there will monitor what that variable is. So the thing that I want to monitor is a thing called dashboard metrics. Cool. So it says cannot evaluate expression, but that's because it hasn't been set yet. I'm on line 32. And line 32 doesn't have dashboard metrics because it's set on line 40. So if I use the step debugger, I go to the next line and it still says on the right-hand side, cannot evaluate expression, but I'm now going to run line 40 where dashboard metrics is set, which is repository get front-end statistics for merchant with date range. Oh, that's a mouthful. And I'm going to run that line. And dashboard metrics is now an array of 4. So I'm going to show you what that is. It's an array of 4, and the 4 keys are new order, processing, completed, rejected. And there we go. And the values are 83333. And I'm going to use this button here, which is resume program execution, which enables you to finish your session and runtime is finished. So if I go to the app and try again, the reason why that didn't work is because there was a timeout. I never got around to being bothered to actually set my PHP timeout to be longer. So that's what happens when it completes. And you can see that in this dashboard, there is new orders processed and completed and rejected. And it's basically just a filtering method on here, right? So let you in a little secret of the code base. That's what that array is. Now with a watcher, I'm going to modify that and I'm going to mutate it. So if I go to just after the breakpoint, there we go, dashboard metrics. I'm going to add some stuff in now, and I'm going to say that dashboard metrics now equals this my mystery method. Nah, you didn't see what that one coming, did you? Dashboard metrics. So it takes itself and it mutates it. There we go. And I'm going to do it again because why not? When in Rome or Austin or Boston or Atlanta, you know, whatever. Dashboard metrics equals this my other mystery method. Oh, it's so mysterious. I can't wait for the exciting conclusion to this. So there we go. Those are two extra methods that are running on the same variable. So now I'm going to show you what the watcher looks like when it's in action. And this example is, the reason why I'm showing this up is it's emulating a real world example of why does that thing look the way it does? Why is that variable wrong? Why is it the wrong thing from the service container? This is some methods of running, spaghetti methods, and you don't know what they are. So, but now we're going to have a look at them. So if I bring this up, we've got the debugger on. Going to refresh the page. It's going to take me to the, there we go, hands-free, just to prove the point. And dashboard metrics cannot evaluate expression because it's not been set. But if we step through, dashboard metrics now is about to be set, which it is on the right-hand side. And it's now 8333, which is what it was before. But my mystery method is about to run. I've just run it. And the watcher says that dashboard metrics is still an array with 8333. And then I'm going to run my other mystery method. Next line. And dashboard metrics is now an array of 4 of 112312963. It's been mutated. We know that my other mystery method has done some stuff, and my other mystery method has, well, my mystery method has not done some stuff. So if we just navigate, my mystery method doesn't do anything. So if I drill into it, return useless comment, return dashboard metrics. So the method doesn't do anything, returns itself. But we know that. If I go back to this and go to my other mystery method, we know that my mystery method has done something because we've seen it. And takes the payload, and then for each metrics as elements by reference, it returns the element with a random integer of 1 to 150. That's a watcher in work, and that's you actually debugging stuff on the fly. Now we're going to be really naughty, and we're going to actually modify runtime. This is my favorite bit. I love this. So I'm going to take out those methods now. I'm going to stop the debugger because I've still got an open session. And I'm going to use the methods I've just shown you with the watcher. I'm just going to take the watcher out and move that to the side. I'm done with them. I'm done with you. Go away. Just going to be rude to the watcher. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it in runtime, and then I'm going to complete runtime. So if I run this now, I've got a breakpoint on line 32. That's fine. Okay, I've hit runtime. So just going to hit, okay, all status here. Okay, dashboard metrics. I'm going to run that line. So it's run. But now I'm going to bring up the console. And this is the console, like the JavaScript console. Dashboard metrics. This is in PHP Storm. So the thing is that you're in runtime, but everything has got autocomplete as if you were just coding it normally. Dashboard metrics equals this, my other mystery method, which is the one that takes all the integers and changes it. And you have to give it dashboard metrics, and I'm going to press return, and that's giving 34, 45, 81, 77 is what the result is. Cool. Okay, but now I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to finish runtime, and now I've just completed runtime. So if I go back to the browser, execution is completed, but new orders processing completed and rejected in this dashboard is now 34, 45, 81, and 77, which is what I modified it with at runtime. You have the ability to do this with absolutely anything at runtime. You can inject services, you can test services. If you want to do it, you can do it. The power that this has is absolutely ridiculous. And I don't really know how I did it before. So there you go. That's runtime modification in process. The last kind of feature of this is conditional breakpoints, which is really, really handy. We found it really handy anyway, which when you hit a breakpoint, stop that. When you put a breakpoint on your IDE, like here, you know, where it's enabled like that. In PHP Storm, I think you can do the same thing in VS Code. You can add the option if you right click on it to set that breakpoint to execute conditionally, which is pretty cool if you think of the case. So like in our case, for instance, some users are reporting bugs and some users are okay. So you've got a kind of control thing. If you've got like a large scale application, and you're trying to drill down into the reason that those users have got problems and others don't. So if you boil it down to something, you can then investigate what it might be. So in the case we've got, we have an entity here called a merchant, which is a user, the logged in user, right? And I'm going to say merchant. We have an attribute on this called allow table service. So each merchant has an attribute of allow table service. So let's say in theory that some people that have got problems have some people that have been sort of reporting in issues have said, I've got some issues, and you've managed to say, well, the thing that is in common is that they're hitting that they have table service on. So maybe we can start emulating the requests that they're making or the logins that they're having. So there we go. I've put that condition in, done. And if you look at the breakpoint now, there's a little, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little question mark and a speech bubble there. So that condition has been set. So now I'm going to actually run runtime. So first of all, I should probably log out. And I'm going to log in as this user. There we go. Test at test.com. This is the merchant that I was looking at before. I'm going to log in. And my dashboard is completed and nothing's happened. So it's not you. Going to try logging in again. I'm going to use a different user this time. This user. Log in. And now we play the waiting game. Didn't touch that. That's because the conditional breakpoint was being here. Conditional breakpoints, you can put any condition in there. That's pretty cool. That's the main kind of meat of all of the talk. So I'm just going to recap on some of those things. Here we go. So, I've not really sorted out my slide properly, so this looks terrible. So I'm just going to fill in all of these. There we go. So that the order was terrible. This is the completed slide, and it looks lovely. So breakpoints, console, and steps and watchers. These are, in terms of programming languages, are pretty standard stuff. That's the reason why it is the Ford Taurus, the horrible oval 1996 looking machine. But the dynamic stack navigation stuff and the conditional breakpoints are something that I find extremely powerful. I'm yet to investigate a lot. I mean, probably if I was investigating outside PHP, it would probably be Python. But the ability to do that at runtime is very, very cool. And runtime modification and profiling, and I'm briefly going to show you profiling only because it's its own subject, really. That's our Ford Mustang, where it's not hard to implement and do properly, but when you have that power at your fingertips, it is incredible. And that is, it makes me think, honestly, implementing Xdebug properly through DevOps engineering, really for especially a junior developer starting out in PHP, is kind of a must. And we'll get onto that kind of bit in a minute. I'm going to do a brief little bit on profiling because it doesn't really form sort of like a huge key part of it. But Xdebug has a profiler installed. So for anyone who doesn't know, a profiler, it means that at runtime, it will log every single function call and the execution time that it takes. And if you switch it on, you can give it you switch it on like so. So if I go to my ini file, what's it called? Xdebug. You've got the Xdebug mode here. If I add profile, I rebuild the container, which I'm not going to do, but if I rebuild the container, that has the profiler switched on. Be wary, obviously, if you switch on the profiler, that your performance will take a massive hit. Don't do that on production. That's madness. If you switch it on, you then have a load of other variables that you can set in Xdebug, such as the output directory and the file naming pattern using regex. If you do that, you can then create profiles of something. So if you've got bottlenecks, usually the best case scenario that we've seen has been eloquent. If you've got eloquent, n+1 or memory usage. I've done this in Symfony, actually, a similar thing in Symfony where doctrine has been terrible with memory management, and that's because we coded it wrong. Stuff like that. If you've got the profiler, that's where you want to be looking at, and that's where you want to look at the execution time. So if you put profile on there and then rebuild it, it will switch it on. And if you switch it on, you then get output files. So the way of reading this is, if you have Linux, there is a KDE application called kcachegrind, which is kind of handy. There is a Windows one. If you look at, I can't remember the name of it, but if you look at the Xdebug website, it'll give it to you. But for our case on macOS, we're using a web-based one called WebGrind. It's a Docker container. So in our case, we're using Docker. So use Docker Compose. Show you this. In the stack, there's a container called WebGrind. It uses that image there, jock dk WebGrind. Important thing is the volume mount. It reads off a directory called temporary. So the output directory of Xdebug on your machine needs to read into Docker, and then it needs to be mounted into the temporary directory of the Docker container that is WebGrind. It's a bit faffy. If you want to have a look at the blog post that accompanies this talk, and it will kind of, it'll show you. Go onto Jump24's website. You can find it there. But WebGrind is running at the moment. So if I go to my browser and go to localhost 8081, here it is. This is WebGrind. Just going to zoom in a bit so you can see it. And I want to, and I've already got some grind files that have been created. So if I update it, there we go. This is a session of loading that dashboard that you've seen previously. And this is an entire cache grind file. So you can navigate by milliseconds of execution. You can look at the amount of times that a particular thing was invoked. So if I go on the left and go to sort by invocation counts, you've got something like PHP is null and PHP is array. That's not surprisingly is the highest, but if you scroll down a bit, you've got SPL, that's the standard library. You could look at something like the amount of root get action is 411, right? So that gives you a kind of profile of how many times roots have been called, how large your routing file is, how efficient it is. And what's quite cool is you've got an option here to show the call graph. So one of the things that showing the call graph taught me was frameworks have, if you build a framework and you have a root that says hello world, the call graph starts to look like this, and it gives you an indication of how much the framework at runtime is taking place. But here's some of it. This is that dashboard. Again, it's that dashboard that you saw. This is the whole call graph. But you can drill into it, and you can scroll across and see where the most kind of lines are being hit. So round about the center of here, we're hitting a lot of things. What are we hitting? The last time I managed to do, like I did this talk, I managed to hit something really cool, which is the application. I've not quite got it, but for instance, there is load roots. So all of the roots at application level are being, and it's a cost of 0.63% of runtime at the point. This kind of stuff is extremely powerful when you start reading into it and then leveling up your developers as part of the process of delivering code. So to sort of conclude now, wrapping up all the features, this kind of the profiling bit of it forms like a key part of it. But the things that we've learned from doing all these things, and these are now what our developers do day to day at Jump24, right? Time is money. Probably the most key thing. The reason why we don't roll out Xdebug as default and we use die-dump for everything is that we don't have the time to do it. We don't have the time to do it because I can just do die-dump and then that's one way of debugging. We conveniently usually forget to mention that that's an extra 40 minutes of debug time every single time that you've got a problem, and drilling into something is impossible. But time is money, but also an investment. So at my employer, we've invested the time to get all of our developers up to speed and to learn how Xdebug works, and therefore use that as part of our development cycle. It's an investment. My goodness, does it pay off? It pays off big style. And on that front, why not level up your team? What I've personally learned from using Xdebug when I previously dabbled in it for years, and I've been developing in PHP since about 2012, so I'm kind of a baby compared to probably most of you that are actually watching. But what this gave me is, it gave me, like that validator example that I showed you in our test suite. I started being able to see how Laravel was working under the hood, and if you do that with same equivalent of PHP or Fuel or Symfony, watching how something works under the hood is leveling up your team. It's looking at how more advanced patterns work in PHP, and therefore it makes your developers a lot stronger. That's how I see it anyway. And giving the tools for a developer to actually use something like a profiler that identifies bottlenecks before they even start, and I'll get onto another bit of this in a sec, but this is extremely powerful, and it puts more power in the hands of our developers in order to get them to a more versed and senior kind of level. And it is working. It is important. The reason I put performance-driven development is because it also, with the pipelines and things like that I've spoken about, it's putting performance. It's a bit like the security problem, where security is like the last thing that developers think of. Why isn't security something that we think of whilst we're coding? In the same way that CI makes that possible with security, it makes it possible with PDD as well, with performance-driven development, which is something that I coined. Someone else has probably coined it somewhere. But that gives us a platform where we're toying with Blackfire.io, or other performance benchmarking, like having how fast in your DevOps tooling, how fast PHP unit runs a test at runtime as part of your CI pipeline. I'm not going to merge this PR unless that performance is resolved. That's a powerful way of writing software, and that's the reason why we're getting very, very good at it at Jump 24. Thank you for listening, everyone. If indeed you still are. I've been Jim Second. If you want to check out the work that we do, have a look at jump24.co.uk, and you can have a look at our blog. Or you can check out really weird records, or you can send general abuse and cancel me at Second J if you wish to. And thanks for hosting me and listening, everyone.
Very good, Jim. That was great. Very, very comprehensive. I'll give you some claps there.
Thanks.
So, great talk. We definitely have some questions, but I want to, hopefully you're kind of open to anything and everything.
I am, yeah. So, but as I found out is the usual kind of procedure. Can you give me about 1 minute to go to the toilet?
Okay. Yeah, no problem. No problem.
1 a.m. toilet run?
Yeah.
Pretty much. If I just get Zoom up so I can actually mute. There we go.
All right. Well, that was a great talk. I think we have a few questions in YouTube, and then you can ask questions via the Q&A tab there in Zoom. Yeah, that was good. What do you guys think, Bobby, Chris?
That was great. I'm trying to pull up the YouTube feed right now on my phone so I can check for questions.
Yep,
I see there's one in the Q&A. Oh, it's a thank you. Never mind.
Very great presentation, definitely detailed. While we've got a second, I keep forgetting to do this. I have JetBrains licenses to give away from their user group program.
Oh, awesome.
So I was trying to think of like an easy way to do this. I would say the first 2 people to email me at chris@atlantaphp.org. That's chris@atlantaphp.org. I will send you for the information for getting a JetBrains license. If you're not familiar with them, they do all PHP Storm, a bunch of IDEs. Their licenses giveaways are good for any IDE. So if you want to play with a Go IDE or something else, it doesn't have to be PHP Storm. You can do that as part of their user group program.
Data grip.
it,
They've got all sorts of fun tools.
I can testify, although some of Data Grip is in PHP Storm, that Data Grip as a standalone product is one of the best SQL IDEs I've ever used.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Yep. But yeah, so as I said, email me, Chris@AtlantaPHP.org. I'll have 2 to give away, and I'll have to remember to keep doing this. So I'll maybe figure out a different way to do them. I think we had like one of those, one of my co-organizers, I don't believe he's here on tonight, put everybody's name into a random picker kind of thing, and we spit out a name and forwarded it on a while back, I think. But anyway,
yeah, we did a random drawing too, but yeah, I don't know how well it's going to work with the thing that Ian built. It requires your phone number. It was really for like in-person events. So I think the format that we're doing now, like kind of like live, they can watch the video and they have the option of like, we may get people tomorrow to watch the video and then like send you an email or something, right? Like, so I think just like first 2 people that send Chris an email get JetBrains stuff. That works for me.
Yeah, I just want to keep it simple and not, I don't need anything but your email address. So that's all good. Nobody yet. I'm refreshing here. May take a minute to get 2 people, but we kind of joke that we've been doing this so long. Everybody in my user group already has a license. So anybody's eligible. You don't have to be in Atlanta.
If it's any consolation, I remember at PHP London, they gave away. They used the same kind of thing. They used scripts in person, and it was. I mean, the joke was it was a Python script for a start, but it used the Meetup API and got everyone. And it took them 5 attempts to try and get rid of the license, because every time someone said, "I've already got one," and then eventually the organizer gave up and then said, "Can everyone put their hands up who's got a PHP Storm license?" And all of the room put their hand up. All 100 people put their hands up.
Well, the good news too is you can append. So if you already have a subscription, you can add another year to it as well. So don't be shy if you're a staunch user and want to stick with it. We can give you another year here pretty easily. So let me know.
Yeah, you don't have to wait till it expires. That's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah, let's see. I've been messing around a little bit with Go, PyCharm, WebStorm. They've got all sorts of stuff.
No love for Eclipse, huh? Oh man.
Yeah, no love for Eclipse.
I don't love Eclipse either.
It's been like probably 10 years since I've launched Eclipse. But
my starting out talk in the world of DevRel was one about tech elitism and tool shaming, which was a fairly controversial kind of baptism of fire. And one of my favorite quotes from that is, I mean, the important takeaway from the whole too long didn't read thing of that is basically, if you do tool shaming or you do elitism, it's always against the person and not the tool that they're using. But someone said, you must be a noob because you're using Eclipse to do your coding. And my senior engineer used Eclipse because he started out and he was like, I can't use anything else because I'm so used to it now.
As long as you're productive, right? I mean, that's what matters.
It's not what I'd use, but each to their own.
I definitely remember talking to somebody in the last, 5 years or so that was like on, what was it? NetBeans?
NetBeans, yeah.
Yeah, NetBeans. I remember that one.
The company I was at, the head engineer was Eclipse, and the co-founder was using NetBeans, but they loved it. They did what they were good at. So
getting a handle on like memorizing all the keystrokes and the shortcuts and the stuff that you were doing, like at like navigating and stuff. I think that takes a while and once you kind of like figure it out, like why learn it again in the design industry? Like this is why like Adobe has such a strong hold on designers is that everybody like, okay, you learn, in Illustrator, it's like the N does something in M and all those little like shortcuts. I mean, it's not just in our industry; it's in other industries as well.
My kind of memory my muscle memory nightmare is operating systems. I'm presenting this talk and I'm using a Mac for this talk, but that's because our company uses Macs.
You're used to the control.
I'll be honest with you. I hate Macs. I used to be a Mac fanboy in the 90s, but my operating system of choice is Linux. So specifically Ubuntu or Mint. Keystrokes are really difficult for me. Completely different.
Jim, you were talking about baptism by fire. I one of my colleagues went to the Vim user group and gave a talk about why Emacs is better, and survived.
But why? But why would you do that? Why would anyone
go watch his talk? He actually made some good points. As to
the most sort of like the most fanatical users are like Emacs. Incidentally, you say that the Tech Elitism talk I did when I did it at, can't remember, somewhere in the UK, Cambridge or London. I did it, and one of the jokes was how we like to fight over completely inconsequential thing. Emacs versus Vim was one of them, and spaces versus tabs was another one. And I made a big joke of it, and I did slides that reference Family Guy and things like that. I did the jokes, and what proceeded to happen during the Q&A was an actual argument broke out about tabs and spaces. The very thing that I was joking about, how elitists love to do this. So I'd completely failed in my mission.
Like Mac versus Windows.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what is the like? Oh, come on! What, we're 16? Come on, who cares anymore?
I think coding standards is different though, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely strong opinions on either side, but like coding, when you get into the coding standards, it should be, like the PSR4 stuff.
I think we're kind of in the PHP world. We're kind of lucky that
we have
the PSR foundation that is the agreed thing. In the other programming language that I'm sadly most versed in, which I don't particularly want to be, but it's just those are the rules. Is JavaScript, and especially doing more sort of Vue.js and Node stuff, and it's just every time I come back to messing around with something in Ruby or Python, and then obviously PHP is my sort of primary thing. I just think about how privileged we are when we have set agreed standards of that's how you do things compared to the Wild West of JS, where there just isn't. It's you're completely dependent on the ESLint file, and that's pretty much it.
Yep. For sure. So I guess questions. Yeah. So all right. I have a couple questions.
Ian's spewing out a stream of opinions in the YouTube chat.
Okay. Well, question early on. Okay, so let's start from the beginning, and then we'll get to Ian stuff. So Trey asked, so does Docker Nginx use the PHP INI like the standard lamb stack? So if you could maybe touch on like how the INI is used inside the container, and if you wanted to modify that, like, is it a similar procedure to, adding in your own custom? I'm kind of extrapolating a little bit on his question, but
you can override. So you can override it. So if I just what have I got? Have I got the stack running? Yeah, I do. So let's just do it. A good example of this is instead of
and you don't have to do it on the fly. You could explain it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it just makes more sense to just look at. So if we look at PHP info,
and you got to do the virtual thingy with the OBS deal. Yeah.
Thank you. So if I look at PHP info, God, what is it? It's that, isn't it? No, that. If we do PHP info, just going to die that. That's Twitter. You don't want to see my Twitter, do you? So this is a Docker container, right? So if you want to customize the INI file, this is what you want to be looking at. You've got in this container, you've got additional INI files passed. So this tells you all of these additional INI files that are passed are all in the same directory, which is USR local etc php conf.d, right? If you want more documentation on that, that comes from this container here, which is the Docker file for PHP uses PHP 7.4 FPM, right? So it gives you a default directory of how things are set.
Are you using Ubuntu in your Docker container?
Yes, I'm using Linux, whatever it is. I'm trying to. So that's PHP 7.5 FPM. If you get it from Docker Hub, I think it either uses. I don't think it uses Ubuntu actually. It might use like Alpine. Is it Alpine? Am I getting that confused with JS? It uses one of the sort of.
I think the base images they don't use Ubuntu, but it's like apt-get clean, apt-get update, right? It's using Ubuntu like stuff. So
yeah, it's using Synaptic. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's the reason why these dependencies here will run, for instance.
Ian knows. Ian says Debian, so okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's so if you so in this file that's injected here, if you want to add stuff that will if you want to add other PHP switches, you can customize. You can use the Docker file to customize it. There's other ways of doing it. I mean, this is injected via Docker Compose, but in the Docker file itself, you can actually set stuff. I mean, it's the DevOps world. You can kind of switch between. There's obviously it's a million ways to skin a cat.
Awesome. Let us know if that answered your question, Trey. Bobby, did you have Ian's questions pulled up? Or did he have questions? Sorry, I didn't get to the end of the chat.
Did you get Trey's question from the YouTube chat?
Yeah.
The one about what would he gain from containerizing?
Oh, no. I
so you said, my next self-learning venture is containers. I've been able to Xdebug pretty deep from localhost and a local.env. What more would I gain from containerizing?
The biggest thing, the biggest advantage of containerizing is when you're working as a team. So if it's just you on your own and you're on a kind of journey, learning how. I mean, Docker in itself has taken me. I honestly think about 2 years to even start grasping the concept of how it ran under the hood. So there are advantages for running Docker out of the box, such as the ability to just muck around with containers. Like I'm going to just put Redis in here. Or I'm going to unplug that, and like just playing with technologies at the click of the fingers. That's the best thing at a personal level. The best advantage of running containers like this and configuring Xdebug is when you're doing it as a team. When you've got a business and you've got a project with 2 developers to 15 developers, onboarding those people. If you're onboarding those people with a PHP stack, like what we do at Jump 24, the ability to say, here is the repo, clone it, and then run this command, and Docker is already installed on their machine, and it's to automatically go and pull all the Docker images down and then wire them all together, and then run Composer and update it, and then run Laravel specific installation procedures that then gives you a stack of stuff together. The amount of time that saves compared to a set of instructions on, I don't know, Confluence or a README file in a repo is
Make sure you have the right version of Composer installed.
Always 2 now. We've run into loads of Composer 2 problems. But apart from that, I didn't think it would be that backwards compatible breaking. But Composer 2 has actually caused like a few. I wouldn't say problems because they've been easy to fix, but the backbone of that point is that saves you. If you say, I'd put an estimate of about 2 days development time per developer, and you've got a team of 20 developers working on a multi-million pound project, multi-million dollar project. That's quite a lot of money you're saving there, and also just stops. Especially if you've got any junior developers or any, I say junior in DevRel, we generally tend to hate that phrase, but any developers starting out, they're going to be completely bamboozled by what's presented to them. If you just say, don't worry about that, we've taken care of that, so that you can just get on with the exact feature that we've given you to do, that's how you save time.
I think a lot I've heard in the past is like it solves the problem where the developers respond back, well, it works on my machine. So
the ability to pretty much erase that phrase from history, it's always got to be a good thing. It works on my machine.
That's no longer an answer when you can run it everywhere and you can distribute containers and images.
I think in the world of PHP, it's probably the reason why Docker containerization is more important to us in PHP than it is for other programming languages. Is that if you have Node, you've got NVM. If you have Python, you've got Python virtual machine, or what is it? Python virtual environment. We don't really have an equivalent that is industry standard. There is a PHP virtual environment thing where it tried to emulate it, but compared to, we have command lines and we have web interfaces running on either Apache or running on Nginx. The ability to abstract that and just make it as part of a stack is kind of priceless, and it just eliminates that level of dependency.
Gets you that much closer to Kubernetes auto-scaling land. I did see there was a follow-up question on Q&A related to Docker. So do you have any recommended Docker image registry hosts?
I did see that registry host. I don't really understand the question.
I think you mean like Docker Hub.
Oh, I see. Yeah, all of this is Docker Hub. All of this is the way that this is built is Docker Hub. But the example that I gave you is because Order, which is the project you saw, is an open source project, and that's why the containers are all on Docker Hub. So I would recommend Docker Hub for that. But for the proprietary projects, and when I start talking about projects that are worth lots and lots of money and things that we do at Jump24 that are big projects, we don't use Docker Hub for that. We're really rolling out AWS Elastic Container Service.
Yeah, ECR.
Which is
ECR. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, sorry, ECR, Elastic Container Registry, which is painful. Is the best way to describe it. It's painful because AWS have decided to, like everything they do, have rolled out a load of their own domain logic.
IAM.
Yeah, it's all and how it works with ISAM and things like that. It's just like, to get to grips with that is you have to relearn like bits of you have to learn how AWS does things. They want that, of course, because they want you completely involved in their ecosystem. But they are the market leader, and that's the easiest, the least path of resistance. But Elastic Container Registry, the way that works is just for us. This is for containers that we've built, right, for our personal containers. I'd recommend that, but that's only because that's the path we've looked down. I don't look at I don't know what DigitalOcean or any others. I'm trying to think of something larger, like like Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure don't really know how they sort of do things like that. But
I'm
that's
pretty
really cool.
sure Google and Amazon, or sorry, Google and Microsoft have their own version of
They've definitely
container
got their
registry.
own kind of versions of
Yeah.
it.
I don't know if GitHub has like integrated container registry yet. I know the large file system thingy, but LFS. But yeah, I don't know if they have built-in container registry stuff.
At Wayfair, we have a package registry that we host ourselves called Artifactory, and we keep all of our Docker images and like composer packages stored in there, so that we're pulling from Artifactory instead of from Packagist or Docker Hub, which gives us the ability to take like a snapshot in time and save it, and that's the thing we deploy to production, and we don't like pull a new version from the public repository until we've confirmed that it's safe.
So that's the ability to control your containers like that is awesome. I mean, like a good example of where we struggled was deploying a small. I had to deploy a small fix to this code base actually, as a sort of an aside from my daily job. It was like, oh, just fix this. So I had a look at it, and I deployed it, and Circle CI failed, and I didn't know why Circle CI was failing. I just couldn't. I had to unravel it and I had to pick and pick and pick. And I think I probably said this in the talk actually. I kind of like gave us a brief. It's the unit. It was the unit tests, and well, it wasn't the unit test. It was Laravel's request rules, and in the request validation, you get to choose a pattern of email validation, and you can choose RFC and DNS. And DNS uses a library that is not Laravel's, that it imports. I can't remember what it's called, to validate that what has been given is a valid email with a valid DNS, and it has a load of top-level domains. And we were using that. In conjunction with the tests were being run in Faker. So Faker was generating fake emails that had a few top-level domains that were failing. So that had only been rolled out recently, that the underlying thing that was doing the validation under Laravel had started doing that. And that's because we weren't in control of Laravel, and Laravel wasn't in control of what it was doing. Having a snapshot control like that would just stop that. So a good
Artifactory seems pretty great. Is it a is there a
Artifactory has its issues.
Okay.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, well, like, what are the drawbacks? Is it expensive? Like, like, is it hard to manage?
We have issues with performance with Artifactory. Might be because we have like some 1,600 some odd engineers pulling from it constantly all day. So, and we're also distributed across Boston area and the Berlin area, as well as a few other random places, but that's where most of us comes from. And yeah, we have there's a lot of times where Artifactory is the root of us not being able to run, I don't know, like composer install may take a long time because you're pulling from like another server and the caching is weird. Artifactory doesn't, I don't know all the details about why, but I know that it has its problems.
Well, I think it sounds like it's at least worth considering. Especially if you have a medium to larger sized organization.
It definitely is. We like, I noticed that like when you run, say you do a composer install, you have this composer.lock file, which like lets you lock into dependencies like versions. Like if you have like these 10 packages, you can set like which versions of each package you should be pulling, but you don't get to set which versions you're pulling of the dependencies of those packages. So if you're pulling like, I don't know, Symfony, some component version 5.2, you'll get that version. It'll make sure you get 5.2. But then if that package pulls like some other package like 4.4.1. It might randomly, like, it may be caret 4.1 and you may end up getting 4.6 or something instead of 4.1. And that's not the thing that you deployed to production. So the next time you try to go to build, it's gonna fail because something changed and it broke. And so I think that's why we do it the way we do it. We make sure we have our own locally cached version of what we pulled last time so that we'll pull the same thing every time until we decide to upgrade it.
Yeah, I mean, having your own packages clone can be nice, and running your own, private package, composer package place to put that stuff, and like having a centralized place for that seems also really useful.
Yeah.
Cool. What were some other questions that we had? I had written a few.
Question.
I've given away the 2 JetBrains licenses already, so thanks everybody.
Awesome. I have a question for Jim. Jim, earlier you said you miss doing talks for real people. Are you implying that we're not real people?
That was more of a statement, not a question, surely. Okay. So the biggest, the start of this, you got my attention really by, I completely forgot that Longhorn PHP. I think I did actually do a CFP for Longhorn PHP last year, but that was my elitism talk, and I was starting out, and it was a bit. I wasn't rough and ready. It was just like a bit like, ooh, that's a bit of a hot topic. I think I might probably submit this talk to Longhorn PHP if you like what you see, and that will be in May, and then I can see people for real. As a classic developer relations or developer advocate type person, I am not enjoying the mixture of starting out in this role properly, like in a role that's defined as dev role, and a lockdown, and having a 6-month-old baby. All 3 of these things make for a 2020's not been great, but it does mean that I get to speak to more meetups, but just not in person. It also just meant that I haven't been able to file any CFPs properly for conferences now that I'm properly getting started. So, hopefully by May next year, I mean, we're if anyone saw that the first vaccine has been administered in the world,
in the UK,
and it happened in Coventry, which is just about sort of 20 miles shy of Birmingham. So it happened here, which is awesome. Like quite random. So yes, to the old people first, and then hopefully I haven't actually had COVID yet, surprisingly, and I ran Fusion Meetup in March of this year, and all of the people that attended it pretty much got it, and I didn't. So somehow kind of got off lightly. But I'm being very, very cautious now at the moment, because obviously if my wife and I get it now at the point where we're in lockdown, looking after my son is going to be very, very hard. But yeah, I'm going to submit to Longhorn and see if you like it. You know the talk now, so you know what to expect.
Awesome. Well, it'll be good to hopefully see you in May.
To state whether I miss people, yes, I miss people a lot.
Seeing people in person is always good.
My best relationship is with my supermarket down the road. That's where I see people.
And the mailman, right? Like the mailman is. I've been like talking to the mailman.
Oh no! In the UK, the postman leaves the post at the doorstop, at the door, like on the porch, and then he walks away, and then rings the doorbell and is like, and does it from a distance, so you don't get out. You can't even. Yeah. You could shout. Actually, I shout to my window cleaner.
Nice. Is that how it usually works, or is that just during the pandemic?
Although there's a window cleaner as well, so it makes me sound like a ridiculous British person, like a chimney sweep or something.
Yep. So good job on getting the test fix during the presentation. Like I was definitely clapping like when you were like ran the test and like the breakpoint, and then it like it swapped back over. Like I was impressed. I like that part. So
I'm just glad I fixed it.
yeah,
Mhm.
that I think, but I mean that's super useful, right? Because I think a lot of times is like you're like, okay, well I'm debugging code, but then you don't really see the example of like debugging unit tests. So like tying in like debugging to unit tests and like having a practical example, I think is going to be useful for a lot of people.
The visibility of debugging stuff, especially when it's emulating browser
Yeah.
behavior, is really, really difficult. Previously, the reason why most people would say you can't use your debugger for this is because the performance was so slow. But Xdebug 3's performance is so much improved, and if you throw the just-in-time stuff and PHP 8 in it, the benchmarks are getting better and better that make it very, very feasible to sort of do it day in, day out.
For sure. So when did Xdebug 3 come out? Like, was it? I should know, but like, it's not registering. Like,
it's honestly only been about, since its official release has been about 3 weeks.
okay,
Derek sent me a message saying, when are you going to update your talk? And the reason why my talk was still okay was because the cache in the Pickle, it's actually Pickle cached on that PHP container, meant that it was pulling in 2.9. So it came out about 3 weeks ago. It's
right around when 8 came out. When 8 came out, maybe, or was it like
just before? Just before, yeah. And it is a big release. It's a big difference.
I don't. So, I guess like most of my questions around Xdebug. I don't remember in Xdebug that controlling it all in that one INI setting where with the comma delimited thing. Is that something that they added recently in 3
that's new.
or
That's new, and it's Xdebug mode, and that amalgamates about 10 or 15 different settings.
Because you used to have to like do it like in like individual INI, and there was
so it'd be like switch on the if you're going to switch on the profiler, you do it like you switch on the debugger the profiler like this, but then you need a load of other switches. It's that mode is a way of streamlining that, where it's just, do you want Xdebug on, and if so, what do you want on, and then we'll set the defaults for those things, and then if you want to change that, then you can go ahead and change smaller things.
Yeah, I mean, because this seems easier to control, like turning features on and off. Because I remember like reading Xdebug documentation and previous versions, and you're like, is it a 0 or 1, or is it on or off? Like,
yeah, there was a lot of bits and pieces on that. Yeah,
right. And then, so what were the advantages of using watchers instead of the variables panel? Like in my mind, it's like maybe the watchers, if you want to highlight a variable, and instead of like going to dig for it in the variables panel, like can you think of any other reason?
There was a good live example that I can think of, which was I kept on getting a fatal exception in an app, and it kept on falling over, and it was to do with dependency injection, and it was driving me absolutely mad because I was looking at the namespace and looking at the thing that was supposed to be the service that was supposed to be bootloaded, and I just couldn't work out what was going on and why something was failing. And I started off doing doing var debug at first, and I was like, no, I need to get the debugger on this. The watcher enabled me, for some reason, depending on a few variables, I can't even remember or go into it in sort of great detail, but depending on a few factors, a different service had DI into was dependent on another service. So I was really struggling to see what the service was and to have some visibility of, and the service was slightly different, like it was a repository, but it was one repository that was this set of things, and then another repository that was named similar but had different methods, that kind of thing. And what the watcher allowed me to do was, just before that was set, before the DI, I set it on the variable, which was like X service or something, and before the methods were being called in the service, it gave me a visibility depending on with the conditional breakpoint of what was setting, what that service was. So I was running it, and the watcher was saying that it's this. I'm like, okay, that's not what I expected. Go back one, right? Do it again. So that's where looking at a watcher in real time was just easier than constantly. I mean, I could have done
going
that by
back into the variables.
I could have just dumped it out every time, but it just gave me more visibility on it. So that was like a real world example of using the watcher. I think personally, I think watchers are probably more front end kind of applicable, but they have their uses in the back end.
For front end like blade templates, or for like JavaScript?
No, just
JavaScript, like cookies
JavaScript.
Yeah,
just JavaScript in general. I mean, for as in like in the V8 engine and whatever browser you're using. But they do have the uses in the backend sometimes.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I definitely getting Xdebug set up with PHP Storm is very highly recommended. How Bobby and Chris, do you guys with your teams, like, is this a pretty common practice for you guys as well?
What, using PHP Storm with Xdebug?
Or like some IDE with in getting like debugging set up, like recommending that everyone on the team like
yeah, our like default recommended setup for our PHP developers is PHP Storm with Xdebug.
Cool.
And that's changed a bit since it got a little tricky when we started decoupling from we have a monolithic code base it's like our legacy code base, and people developing on that have a very simple setup for Xdebug, but doing it in a Docker container is a little more tricky. So like getting the port to map to the right, like, the inside the container to map to the host. And if we were doing development on what do you call it? Remote virtual machine. So the remote virtual machine is where you would run your code. You would develop it locally, but sync it to your remote machine. So then you had to have like two tunnels. You had to have one go into your remote machine and one go into the container. So it was a weird, tricky thing that took us a little while to get people to understand how to do it across the organization. So that was a fun exercise, I guess. But I think still probably a decent percentage don't use it if they're working on decoupled code. They don't use the Xdebug, but it's something we're working on. We're eventually going to get that fixed.
We're kind of a blend too. We've got that remote development kind of problem, and it's always been tricky. And we don't have a particular standard. We've got people on Storm. We've got diehard Vim people. We got an Emacs guy. A lot of people are starting to go towards VS Codes. We're starting to be a little more full stack. So it's kind of a mixture, and we don't have any strict guidelines for it. But we've had a few people using Xdebug a little bit, and I'm just getting into VS Code a little bit myself, and so I'm interested to get Xdebug up and going with that.
Nice. My understanding from looking at it, from looking at setup procedure on VS Code is that VS Code is personally from an ID perspective. I mean, I use it for more Node, but it lacks a lot of very, very advanced features of PHP Storm, but that's going to be sort of obvious from the get-go, because one's designed built for it, and JetBrains have been doing it for years. But VS Code kind of it's got some plugins that work, but setting up stuff on VS Code is a lot easier. It's got less gotchas. It's got less weird for instance, I use the command line for Git because I will not use PHP Storm's command Git controls because they use different language. They use update your project. Do you mean Git pull? And do you mean Git pull with commit merge or not? Or that doesn't mean anything. Why are you using different language? So
the same way.
Yeah, VS Code I think has nailed that down a lot. But it's in terms of especially setting it up with Docker and PHP Storm is easier. is definitely easier than I found it.
I also
It seemed
won't
like
use
they've
PHP Storm as a DB client. I use my own external DB client we use MS SQL usually at Wayfair, but I'm not a huge fan of the PHP Storm DB client features.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to run because we're coming up to 4 hours since my son had his milk. And
Yeah.
he's probably going to scream his head off in a second.
Oh no!
I was about to say we got to remember he's what 5 or 6 hours ahead of us, so we should probably let him.
Yeah.
It's 20 past 2 in the morning. So
before you go,
staying up
James,
to wait with us.
we'll see how he does. At the moment, he's kind of clockwork, so he should be. The main advantage is I take nights, so my wife can actually stay in bed sleeping because she has to like look after him during the day. So I'll see if I can interrupt it.
You're on the 4-hour duty of you got it, the feeding time.
Yeah, it's pretty exhausting, but I chose to be a dad, so what are you going to do?
Well, thank you so much, James, for the talk. I did have one thing on the profiling thing, and I wasn't sure if you were aware, but PHP Storm, you can load the Xdebug profiling stuff directly in PHP Storm. I don't remember exactly how to do it, but it is, you don't have to use the external tool. And I don't know how it compares, but
Oh yeah. No, I didn't even sort of go down. That's a hangover from. I say hangover. That was, you could always configure Xdebug in PHP Storm and have a runtime, but PHP Storm's runtime environment stuff, you could do it for tests as well. With Docker is a real pain because you've got to reconfigure PHP Storm to say, don't look at your native operating system's PHP variable, PHP executable.
Yeah.
So you then have to get it to drill into Docker, and then you have to do the same thing with Xdebug, and it's a great pain. You can set it up if you want, but I think personally it's a faff.
It's just easier to use the external thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering all my questions and talking.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
Yep.
Thanks again for reaching out to us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
Especially time shifted. So
that's part and parcel of what I do. That's all right. Thanks very much for hosting me, folks. And then look out for Longhorn PHP CFP. And have a good evening all.
Sounds good. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.